Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our March segment of Family Law Uncorked. I'm Jen Bordeaux, the Director of Public Relations, and I'm joined here today with attorney and partner here at the firm, Sarah Hink. It is March, and so spring is upon us, which we're all, I think, excited about warmer weather. Maybe not the pollen, but definitely warmer weather.
Less rain eventually.
Yeah, maybe. And that also means we're heading into wedding season. And you might be asking yourself, what is a family law firm or divorce firm talking about wedding season for? But we do prenups. We don't just, we're at the end of a relationship, but we can also help people at the beginning of one. So we thought we would shed a little bit of light on prenups because a lot of times they are associated with celebrities, very wealthy people, politicians, things like that. So we just wanted to chat a little bit about prenups, who needs one, when it's a good idea, and if it's appropriate for everybody. So that's why I brought in the big guns to talk about how all of that works. So we're just going to kick it off with a few questions. Starting off, what is the purpose of a prenup? Why do people get prenups?
Well, I guess we should start with what is a prenup, and it's a contract between two people, just like any other contract, business contract, that sort of thing. The same rules. It needs to be in writing. It needs to be signed by both parties. In North Carolina, we are under the Uniform Premarital Agreement Act. So there's a lot of states that have similar laws to ours. Other states have very different laws when it comes to premarital agreements. But ours just requires to be in writing and signed by the two people that are going to be married. So you're not married yet for the premarital agreement, obviously, but it can cover distribution of property. So the purpose is to go ahead and agree to how you will divide your assets or debt if there's going to be a divorce. And of course, you never go into a marriage planning for divorce, and that's not necessarily the purpose of it, but it's more of a insurance because it does happen. It does happen, and you can plan for it just like you plan for maybe losing a job or losing for or another circumstance in the future that you don't want to happen, but plan accordingly. So the purpose will be to protect your assets going into the marriage, your separate assets if you own property going into the marriage. Maybe you're concerned about the other person's debt or their ability to accumulate debt.
Mm-hmm.
So that can
spending habits.
Yeah, so that can kind of take one thing off the table. We see a lot of people that end up, people ask why people get divorced. What do you see the most of? And everyone thinks affairs, but financial problems in a marriage can arise too, and that's a big cause for divorces or why people end up going down that road. So having something in place that says, well, if we do separate, then I know that you're going to take that debt. That's going to be your responsibility, not mine. That can kind of take that weight off your shoulder and maybe improve your relationship during the marriage. So there's a lot of different things that you can contract to in the premarital prenuptial agreement.
Okay, and I like that analogy as far as insurance is concerned, because we're mandated to have insurance for certain things. Obviously commercial insurance for businesses, your health insurance, property and casualty insurance, homeowners insurance, and you have those things as a fail-safe. You don't ever hope that something happens to your car, that you get in an accident, or that you have to replace your roof on your house, but it's there as a fail-safe. And the reality, we are very transparent and honest that there are several relationships that do unfortunately end in divorce, and so it's just like you said, an insurance policy basically for that.
You only have control over yourself and what you choose to do, and your assets. You worked hard. If that's something you're concerned about, then I think it's a great opportunity before a marriage to have that premarital agreement in place. And also, it gives you the opportunity to sit down with your future spouse and talk about finances. What do you have? What is your credit report number? People don't ask these questions before they get married sometimes, and it's very important to have that conversation. How much debt do you have? In the future, what do we look like together? Or if we're going to manage our accounts separately, because that's something you can put in the agreement as well, is say, we're going to designate just certain things to be marital that will be divided on the divorce, and everything else will remain separate. So as you're going through the marriage, you have the choice to either make something a marital asset or to keep it as your separate asset. And that's what businesses too. People with businesses get concerned about that.
Okay. Well, I mean, and to that point too, when you're looking at those things, if it's already written out in that contract, if later on in the relationship, it does end in divorce, there are a lot of emotions that are going on at that time, and a lot of uncertainty and things that you have to deal with mentally and emotionally, and you've got, maybe there are kids involved as well. And so having that document already takes a lot of that guesswork out of, depending upon what's in the contract, of course, but can take a lot of that guesswork out and help with some of that uncertainty.
Yeah, and it's cheaper to have an attorney draft a premarital agreement than to fight over assets in the divorce phase if it's not already agreed on, decided about. So that is also something to keep in mind.
Yeah, so definitely a few purposes that can be beneficial if for a prenup.
Less to fight over.
Yeah. So you mentioned, some of the things that can go into a prenup. So we'll just talk about that now. So what are there things that cannot go into a prenup, and what are some more of the things that can go into a prenup?
Generally, just like in any contract world, things against public policy cannot be included in a contract. So if I say, if you don't go steal me $1 million a year, then you're not going to get anything when we divorce. That's against public policy, and also that's a criminal act. So you can't put anything in there like that. When it comes to thinking about the relationship and what claims may arise from a divorce, that you can put it in there, but it's not going to be enforced. So you have to use those terms a little differently there. But child support, you can't put anything in where you can write it down. They're just not going to enforce it if it somehow restricts the child's ability to have child support. So if you say, if we separate and I'll agree to pay $100,000 a year in child support, and that's in the prenup, and then after you separate and you have kids, if that's not contrary to the kid's rights, then the court might uphold that.
Okay.
But if you say, I waive child support in the prenuptial agreement, and then you get married, you have kids, and you divorce, that's not going to be upheld. That's not going to be a waiver of child support, because support's for the child. And that's the same thing for custody arrangements. It's the best interest of the child. So you can't, if you don't have a child, doesn't exist, you can't really forecast what's going to be in the best interest of the child too.
Very true.
But you can include alimony provisions. North Carolina does say that you can waive alimony in the premarital agreement. Not all states are the same when it comes to that. If you separate and you go through the divorce process, there is a little way around that. If you are the supporting spouse, or the supporting spouse makes enough money to give you alimony, and the dependent spouse would, without that support, be eligible for public assistance. So if you have a spouse that can't work, on disability, doesn't really receive that much disability, I haven't had a case like this, but the law does say that if you somehow end up being able to get Medicaid and food stamps, but your ex-spouse makes enough money to give you alimony, then the court can set that aside and order alimony in your case.
Okay. Okay. What about some of these crazy things that we hear about in prenups of celebrities, because that's what's all over the news, right? Whenever a celebrity has a prenup, sometimes crazy things about weight loss or weight restrictions if you get above a certain weight, or those kinds of things. Can those technically go in a prenup?
You can put whatever you want in there. It's going to be up to the court to uphold it and find it enforceable. Those kind of things might be against public policy. The court might say, I don't know if that's a reasonable thing to include in an agreement for premarital agreement. So you hear about those things, whether we get to see that actual contract or it's just celebrity gossip.
True.
I do not know, but a lot of times you will find, either you can get crafty, which is fun in these contracts. You can do step-up clauses for alimony. If you don't stay married for 5 years, then you get nothing. And a lot of times that's what you see in these celebrity prenups. Is kind of length of the marriage. You can get this, and just different triggering events and how much money you can actually obtain following that, of course. Another thing that you should know about prenups that are good to include, I'm sure celebrities do this too, is disposition of your property on your death. So if you have, I see this a lot in people in their second marriages and they have children from their first marriages, they want to make sure that in the event of their death, that their children inherit from them, not their new spouse. So there's crafty things you can do with that, and it can work with your will as well. So that's something to keep in mind.
Okay, good to know. I hadn't thought about that part either. Yeah. Awesome. So with that being said, we've talked about kids, and we've talked about, how prenups can help with assets and things like that. So does everyone need a prenup? Like in every situation, is there a cause for a prenup?
Well, of course, I'm going to say yes, because that's what I do. But I think that more so than not, it would be helpful for people to have them.
Okay.
there's a big stigma attached to premarital agreements, so a lot of people don't have them. They think that you do need to have this huge wealth, this assets, and you need things to protect, and you say, oh, I don't have anything, so I don't need it. But like we talked about before, you may accumulate things during your marriage, and so it forecasts that. And you might not have anything now, but what if you end up making a lot of money during your marriage? Is that going to be separate property, or is that going to be something you split with your spouse? That's something you can agree to, even if it doesn't exist on the time that you make that agreement.
And like you said too, with businesses, which is part of the property, but specifically about that, if you're thinking of entrepreneurship and owning your own business and protecting that moving forward.
Yeah, my favorite thing is just having the freedom during the marriage to say, okay, that's going to be in my separate name. If something were to happen to us, we separate, I know that that's my separate property. I mean, in the real world, without a premarital agreement, that's going to be marital property regardless of whose name is under. So that's just something to keep in mind.
And I guess to the other side of that too, so if you're, let's say your spouse that owns the business, or fiance I should say, that owns the business, and you're going into the agreement, the other, partner in the relationship, it's also kind of a protection for them, because if that person's taking ownership for the business and the business tanks, they're not going to be responsible for that part of the property as well.
In the event of a divorce.
Yes.
If you stay together, they can still go after you, because you're married, and they're going to, the creditors are creditors. So break up before that.
If you see the business tanking,
like, oh, it's time to jump ship.
Time to bail.
Yeah.
Okay, so couples engaged, and one party is heavily thinking about a prenup, that it might be a good idea, but they don't know how, like you said, there's a stigma that's attached to prenups a lot of times. So how would you suggest someone approach their significant other, their fiance, about a prenup if they're not so sure that they're on the same page about it?
It's probably easy for me to talk about it because I haven't had to do it since I'm not married and haven't engaged, but I mean, my mind just goes to, well, that's a serious conversation, and if you're going to get married, it's time to get comfortable having serious conversations. Yeah. Like we talked about before, it's a good opportunity to put your finances on the table and talk about debt and talk about assets and what's important to you and where you see your careers going. But I can't really think, if you're in the relationship, I mean, maybe just slam it on the table.
This is what, sign it or else. No.
That is not a good start. Also, be in mind that you don't want to do it the day before the wedding. I mean, that's something that will make that contract unenforceable in court. So you want to make sure that you talk about it way in advance of the wedding, that you seek, I don't know why we get so many calls. They're like, I need a prenup. I get married in 2 weeks.
Yeah, like
you've been engaged.
Nothing like a rush decision. Yeah, exactly.
So definitely plan in advance. Have that discussion with your soon-to-be spouse well in advance of the wedding. That way you can talk about any issues between the two of you. Have time to seek out an attorney to draft it for you. Then your spouse is able to, or future spouse is able to get another attorney if they want to have someone else look at it for them.
Right.
Because the contract has to be entered into voluntarily. There can't be any coercion under duress. So, if you're about to walk down the aisle and you're like, hey, honey, by the way, we signed this.
I know we're about to do this, but P.S. Here's the marriage certificate and the prenup first.
That's not going to be worth that much in the future.
Yeah.
And I'm sure a lot of parents push on their children to have prenups. I feel like that's something that could probably happen a lot because of inheritance and that sort of issue.
With second marriages, I've heard it's more common maybe to see a prenup for either if both parties or one is heading into a second marriage because, well, one, they've been through it before, they've been through a divorce before, so they know what that's like.
Yeah,
and
that was hell. I don't want that.
Yeah, exactly. And they've probably accrued more assets or stuff with children involved and things like that. So definitely those scenarios are good too. And a point you touched on that definitely want to clarify is like Sarah could not advise both parties about the prenup.
Right.
We could only advise one, or she could only advise one party coming in, and then the other party, once it was drafted, could take it to another attorney and have the attorney review it on their behalf to advise them, just to make sure that we are compliant with the ethical rules of North Carolina State Bar. Okay, so what if parties have now gotten married, they thought about a prenup, but they didn't act on it, and now they're married, but now they're like, oh, we should have gotten an agreement. Is there anything that they can do at that point as far as an agreement is concerned?
So it's a post-nuptial agreement, and that just means it's drafted and signed during the marriage. And it's not really that different. You can still contract to the same things, and At that point, decide what you're going to list as separate property, marital property, alimony provisions, that sort of thing. So it's never too late. And if you have a prenup in place when you get married and things change, you can always modify that by signing a new one, and maybe both parties have to sign it again. And that made me think about Donald Trump, because we know that he's been married 3 times and 2 divorces, and there's prenups in both of those first 2 divorces. And it turns out his divorce from his first wife, Ivana, they had 4 different prenups during the marriage. So they redid theirs a lot. And so you might do it if you change wealth, or maybe something happens during the marriage that makes one person not very happy with the other, and so they, okay, well, will you agree to stay with me if we sign this contract?
So they amend the contract.
They amend the contract, They change things. I know that even with those prenups, they went to court after they separated, and Ivana ended up getting more than what the prenup said, so somehow she got around that.
Had a good attorney.
She did. I think she was supposed to get somewhere between $1 and $5 million. She ended up getting $14 million.
Oh, yeah, that's an upgrade.
Estate, and get this, $650,000 annually for child support. It's a pretty good deal.
That's a pretty decent chunk of change for child support.
And so then, as we know, Donald broke up with her, and then he went and married his next wife, Marla Maples, and they had a prenup as well. And under hers, she only got $1 million. And that
one
stuck in
measly
place.
million.
But I thought that, they were together for 4 years. They agreed to redo it at 5 years, so they didn't quite make it. She just had to get out of there, I guess. And but the interesting thing is, in their prenup, they have a confidentiality provision, which I think is really important for people to consider too. That she couldn't go on and talk about their relationship, couldn't write any memoirs, books to sell, that sort of thing. So that provision was upheld, and that's something to consider too. If you're in the public eye or public figure and you're gonna get married, put something like that in there to keep your secrets and your relationship
private within the relationship.
Yeah, because you don't want anyone going out there and profiting and saying things that either aren't true or just things you don't want out in the public anyways.
Yeah.
So that was interesting as well. And I'm sure that he has a current prenup with his current wife, so maybe we won't ever see that one.
Yeah, maybe that one won't come out. Awesome. Well, I think this has been really educational about prenups. Do you have any other little knowledge nuggets or suggestions when it comes to prenups?
Just give it some thought. If you're engaged or if you're thinking about getting engaged, I think people just gloss over it and think, everything is merry and bright and we're going to get married. I don't need to consider these things. We're never going to get divorced. Just take a moment to talk to your future spouse about finances and whether or not this is something that you two should consider.
Yeah, and again, reiterating that you're not advocating saying that, well, divorce is probably going to happen, so we need to have this in place. I really like the insurance policy. It's an insurance policy.
And it's just being realistic about things. I mean, your marriage, half of it is kind of like a business. I mean, you're buying and owning things together, so might as well have a little contract about that.
Yeah. Absolutely. I like it. Definitely good things to think about. Well, that concludes our Family Law Uncorked segment for March. If you have any questions after this, please feel free to reach out to us. You can give us a call, 919-719-3470. You can also reach us on our website, here on Facebook, through Instagram, Yelp. You can reach us a lot of different ways. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us for any questions related to a prenup or any other family law matter. And make sure to tune in next month. April is Child Abuse Prevention Month, or Child Abuse Awareness Month, and we will be talking about emergency custody and what kind of surrounds all of that and qualifies and how to protect
very important
children.
To know if you have children.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks again for tuning in tonight, and we will see you next time.
Thank you.